please. Keep going past that one. Hovind doesn't like varves either, but there's an obvious difference between regular varves and storm varves. Next, please. And this is what I was wanting to get to. The varve count, counting the number of varves versus the carbon-14 age going back 12,000 years, and now a chronology unbroken back to about 45,000 years. Is the amount of carbon constant? Is it made in a constant amount? No. But there are correction curves. Next.
Time. Do I ask a question or respond to the question? Well, let's see. I think you're 0 for 2. You didn't explain where life got started. You didn't explain how life learned to reproduce itself. Let's try a third one here. Natural selection only works with information that is already present. For instance, cows have the information to produce a leg, and sometimes they produce one in the wrong spot. A 5-legged cow is born. But they don't ever produce a feather or a wing or a beak, because the information is not there to produce something like a feather on a cow. So how can natural selection, working with information already present, produce something new, as opposed to keeping the species or kind or whatever just simply to be a strong, healthy species? I don't see how you can get something new. How do you get a higher progressive, a higher life form from natural selection or mutations? Or, explain how this works, please. How you get a higher life form.
What number is that?
Number 12. Natural selection only works with genetic information available and tends to keep species stable.
No problem.
Okay, no problem. Good.
This is a good question. Genes sometimes duplicate and perform new functions. You have genes for color vision in your eyes, except some of you males who have kind of not so good color vision genes. And these all can be traced back to a time when there were fewer types of color genes available. One good example of a new function, this is grade 67, you ready? Okay. Would be to look at the color genes that are present in monkeys. Now, if a designer designed them, one would think that, well, yeah, they should have about the same kind of color vision because they're doing their monkey things and they're in the jungle and they're eating fruits of different colors. But if we look, the New World monkeys, the apes, and humans all have color genes that are very much the same. The New World monkeys have color genes that are much less developed. They can't see colors as well as we can. Why? Because color genes have evolved from rhodopsin, which is a black and white gene, to give blue cones, green cones, and red cones. The molecular data for this is pretty much indisputable. So this is one gene doing a new function. This is natural selection. This is certainly a new variety, and I think that color vision is a little more complex than black and white vision. You can see the same thing if you look at digestive enzymes and blood proteins.
Your example that you gave of the monkeys having different color vision certainly could be an example of loss of information, not necessarily gain of information. It appears to me like your evolutionary prejudice has led you to interpret any evidence as evidence for evolution, where it certainly could be that there's been a loss of genetic information. You assume because one can see 3 colors and one can see 2 colors, the one that has 3 has evolved higher than the one that had 2. Maybe they both had 3 at the beginning and one lost it for some reason. Darwin was certainly confused about the eye. He said, suppose that the eye could have been formed by natural selection. It seems absurd. And I'll be glad you mentioned in your letter about talking about the entire quote. I'd certainly be glad to do that. I forgot, I left the book at the church, but I've got it tonight if you want to see that. The eye is incredibly complex. Textbook says it formed over millions of years. I resent that. This textbook says you can better understand how the eye might have evolved if you can picture a series of changes. And what you just gave us was an imaginary picture of how it might have happened. That's not science.
In your seminar notebook, or at least in your website, you connect Darwin to a lot of racist tendencies. While we're talking about racism, what is the origin of the Southern Baptist denomination?
I have no idea. I am an independent, temperamental, fundamental Baptist. I am not a Southern Baptist. I don't know.
Well, then, before we blame racism on Darwinism, perhaps you'd like to hear the following quotes from Richard Furman, president of the SBC in 1822. The right of holding slaves is clearly established in the Holy Scriptures, both by precept and example. Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist. For all the slaveholders with whom I have ever met, the religious slaveholders are the worst. And after the end of the Civil War, Southern Methodists, Southern Baptists, and Southern Presbyterians all continue to denounce emancipation as contrary to the will of God, and none of them will acknowledge, nor do many even remember, that their religion arose from a theological defense of slavery. And finally, in 1960, Bob Jones, if you are against segregation and against racial separation, then you are against God Almighty. No nation has ever prospered or been blessed like the colored people in the South. So there's plenty of blame to pass around. Don't lump it on Darwin.
Do I respond to that? Question. Well, let's see. I'm still not Southern Baptist. That's all you quoted. Question. I asked you a second ago how natural selection could produce something new. I don't believe you answered that. I have to go back and watch the tape, see if I understand all that. But that, by my count, would put you out at 0 for 3. Is it possible that similarities in design that we observe, this is question number 11, between different animals prove a common creator instead of a common ancestor? Every time you see a biology textbook showing some similarities of design, like the forelimb of the animals or anything, they always attribute it as proof for evolution. What is wrong with the creationist position that says God created the animals and plants and they bring forth after their kind, and the common designer used a common theme, like Ford makes 4 tires on most of their vehicles because it's a good theme that works. Common designer argument.